Welcome to Margins and Mandates, the show where plays, pivots, and pressure-tested leadership take center stage. I'm your host, Jeff Lortz, former operator, advisor, and founder of the Agile Operator. Today's guest is Justin Nihon, CEO of Linear Air, a company that sits at the intersection of aviation, logistics, and software. Linear Air started as an operator with aircraft and pilots and all the FAA complexity that comes with it, and evolved into an asset-light, technology-enabled platform that connects travelers with a massive network of charter aircraft. We talk about what drives that kind of strategic pivot, how you build an advantage with pricing intelligence and transparency. We discuss why Justin is focused on flying the business with data, including dynamic pricing, demand prediction, and the early wave of agentic commerce that could let AI assistants book charter trips without ever leaving the chat. Let's get into it. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The world famous Margins and Mandates podcast, and you've made it to the pinnacle of your career as a guest on Margins and Mandates.
No, I'm excited to be here, and it's nice to speak with you again.
Yeah, no, it's great. It was really interesting talking to you the other day because I've never really thought about chartering a private jet before as something that a common person like me could actually do. But after talking to you and hearing about Linear Air, I guess it's kind of a thing and the option, right, for people to think about.
For sure. Yeah, one of the things we're working on, among others, is making the world of charter aviation more accessible and providing more information and just letting people know that it's not all about the private jets or the G5s or the champagne, right? We're much more around aircraft selection for the mission rather than maybe the opulence or the luxury. Of course, that exists out there, and we could certainly support it. But I think as we'll talk about over the course of our discussion, there's a lot more opportunity, I think, for folks, both individual or business, and for different trip profiles to leverage charter aviation. So, that's one of the areas we're focused on.
So before we get too ahead of ourselves, why don't you describe Linear Air and maybe a little bit about your journey with the company?
Yeah. So this is my second time around with Linear Air, and now as CEO, I have responsibility for kind of setting the strategy and our business model. But I got involved with the organization very early on in my career and just kind of gravitated towards the travel and hospitality business. My father had actually spent a long time in that industry as well. And so I saw what Linear Air was doing. This was probably back in 2003 when the company had first started. And they were really trying to, and they were a pioneer in the air taxi space. So there's been a lot of advancement, I think, in aircraft efficiency as well. And so we had a fleet of Eclipse 500 very light jets, which carried smaller passenger counts, much more for regional travel. And so anyway, I gravitated towards that. Spent about 5 years with the organization. Then I moved into technology, notably with companies like Oracle and Amazon Web Services. Stayed in touch with the then CEO, Bill Herp, and just followed along in Linear Air's journey, and just kind of made sense for me to come back and join the organization. So that's a little bit about my time in between stints and how I came back to the organization. But Linear Air itself is really defined as a technology-enabled air charter broker. And we've evolved over the years back from when we were I'll get a little technical on you here, a Part 135 air charter operator. That's when we had the fleet of Eclipse 500 very light jets, that's the Caravans, and evolved and saw an opportunity to bring what we really define as regional air mobility to the masses, and educate people that, like I said earlier, it's not necessarily about kind of the luxury or the big jets. There's a lot of different options out there to fulfill different trip profiles and missions. There's over 6,000 regional airports in the United States. We offer over 7,000 aircraft available for charter. So you can kind of get a picture as to like how wide of a spectrum, we can fulfill for the needs of people that the commercial service or the large luxury jets just don't fulfill. So that's really where we're positioned now. Is working on educating the market that that there are regional travel options that can fit those needs.
So what was the driver for the evolution, right? So you started operating a fleet, right? And that's a very different business, right, than your technology platform for the most part today. I guess a B2C technology platform, if you put it in sort of SaaS operating terms. Yeah. What was the business drivers, right, for that evolution?
Yeah, I think again, it was probably an opportunity to leverage, where technology was going. One, and at the time, I think when we first made the initial pivot, we were positioning ourselves more as a marketplace and working with companies like Kayak and very focused in the air taxi segment. And so I'll spend maybe a moment there just kind of defining how we look at aircraft categories, because we offer a broader selection than most in the air charter space, anywhere from a single engine piston aircraft all the way up through the heavy jets like a G5 or a Challenger, that sort of thing. And so we had initially started in the air taxi space, which is primarily smaller range, not as fast, slower aircraft, anywhere from say 1 to 8 passengers, and focused, I think, in kind of that regional air mobility, right? Shorter flights, whether it's from Boston to New York to DC, in many cases more remote airports, but I think those are some of the more traditional routes that you might see, right, or people are familiar with. We can get into, and I think we may talk about this in a little bit, some of the challenges that we had with working with a Kayak and another company, Hipmunk, for a while. But I think the company started to evolve and said, okay, well, we have this technology platform now. We don't necessarily, and that's been evolving over time, and we can certainly talk about that as well. We don't necessarily need to focus our efforts only on one particular segment within charter. We can kind of offer a range of options to our customers. And so we very much, like an Uber, offer the aircraft categories to people, not necessarily very specific aircraft. And so we break it out as air taxi or a premium air taxi, an executive air taxi, which would be something like a King Air or a Pilatus, which people may be familiar with. But then all the way through, the personal jets, the light jets, the heavy jets, et cetera.
Okay. So at some point you just started to sort of wind down, the fleet that you were maintaining. I would think the economics of the business must be completely different. When you have these hard assets, right, and operating costs that are extraordinarily high, I would think, right?
Yeah. We've moved much more towards kind of that asset light model. And I won't take us down too much of a rabbit hole. I mean, when we were still operating as a Part 135 charter operator, we were also doing pilot training. We were also doing aircraft maintenance. So there were a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different work streams. And I think this is a little bit, obviously has its complexities, but there's not as many moving parts as I'm sure you can imagine with training and maintenance. There's a lot of FAA requirements and regulations that you need to adhere to. Yeah, so much more of an asset light model now, and focusing on connecting the demand with the supply, because there's obviously, as I mentioned, 7,000 or so aircraft in the United States available for charter, and leveraging our technology to try to connect those pieces.
So in terms of scale, give us an idea of like how many bookings per day, or like what are your sort of metrics that you monitor that sort of indicate what the volume of the business is and how you're growing.
Yeah, I would say we're doing in the thousands of flights over the course of a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you measure those just in terms of a reservation. How many reservations are you booking? On a per day, per week, per month basis.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Trips. Yeah, we call it, I would say we define it as trips. We do monitor or keep an eye on, how many flight legs, if you will. But a trip could be any number of scenarios. It could be a one-way trip. It could be a same-day round trip. It could be an overnight. It could be a multi-day stop. There was a trip that I noticed yesterday where we've got some folks that are making multiple stops in Texas over the course of 3 days. So that's another scenario where commercial options just aren't reasonable for you, right? You have multiple meetings over 2-3 days. You're never going to be able to do that, and you might not even be able to drive it either, especially when you're talking about a place like Texas. So, in this particular case, it made perfect sense for them to work through us.
Okay. And is the booking process a completely automated process online, or is there a human in the loop at any point along the way?
Yeah, good question. I would say a human is available in the loop if needed. I would say we make it available and offer instant pricing and instant booking when you show up to our website. And that's unique in the industry. There are some other competitors out there that have that, but a lot of times it's behind a firewall or behind it's gated and you need to log in with your membership. We make that available to people up front, and we can get back to why that also works for us in a little bit. But so that's kind of unique to us, and we provide that pricing for all of the different aircraft categories. So when the pricing comes back, it'll give you pricing for the air taxi, it'll give you pricing for a light jet, heavy jet. So you can see those and compare those all at the same time. That's really unique in the industry because in the charter broker world, there's usually and historically has been a lot of back and forth. You request a quote, they go out and source the aircraft, and then they send you the price, and you say, oh, well, this one doesn't work for me. And then you're kind of back to the drawing board. We try to cut down that process by giving you instant pricing and booking available. And there's still, unfortunately, a lot of bad actors out there too that are a little bit shady with their pricing. You start the booking process with one price and you end up with a completely new price by the time that you're ready to put down your credit card or send a wire or what have you. And so we're trying to make it much more accessible and transparent through this model.
And is that sort of indicative of how you've evolved the platform as well? Starting with some more simplistic capability, automation, I guess, of the appointment, that does involve more human interaction, all the way through to rarely involves human interaction, and adding the features and functions and capability to support that. Is that kind of how the platform has evolved?
I would say that the instant pricing and booking, I think, had always kind of been there, and that predates my time to a certain extent. And that's a very core element, I think, of our offering. And I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't intentionally evade the initial question that you had back to, human in the loop. It is still a service where people want to feel comfortable and understand what's going on or what's happening, right? And it's obviously more than a commercial airline ticket. And so we do get a lot of people, especially the first time, calling in just to understand what we are as an organization. Is this pricing legit? Is this definitely the price that I'm going to end up paying at the end of the day? And we've got a fantastic team of folks that are very familiar with the industry, have been in the space for a long time. And we work to make sure that they're comfortable with the option they've selected, that it aligns with their trip profile, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would say we have that available for anybody that does want to call in and talk to somebody and just has questions. But it is available to instantly book on the website. And we find that after one or two times, our repeat customers are doing that. They're like, okay, we get it. Yeah. We know Linear Air is legit. We know the organization now, and I can feel comfortable. And, as I'm sure you can imagine, people have their either similar trips that they do often or aircraft categories that they prefer, that sort of thing. So once they become familiar with it, then I think they start to use that automated booking process a lot more.
Okay. Yeah. So when you and I met earlier, we talked a little bit about marketing, right? And you had sort of just, I think at the beginning, sort of talked about your segmentation in a way, right? You've got different kind of, segmented ICPs, if you will. Do you guys think of it that way? Do you have, your go-to-market set up in segments? And then, talk about, what is your primary demand gen program, and maybe if it's different by segment.
Yeah. I would say we're working on and evolving our segmentation. We just launched a renewed membership program the other day, which has a little bit more of a flavor towards the business travel or how we could support as a virtual flight department. One of the unique things about Linear Air is we have, a network of all of those operators that have the 7,000 aircraft available out there, right? And so I would say we are kind of looking at it a little bit of in individual or leisure travel versus the high net worth individual that kind of combines both, right? You've got a graduation one night, but you need to make it to a business meeting the next morning. And so they may be doing it for both types of travel. And then you just have your pure business travel where you've got multiple users, multiple itineraries, maybe a central hub that's coordinating the travel for those folks and might not necessarily have the relationship with all of those operators out there. In fact, that they probably don't, because that's a large undertaking, right? So if I were to give you a segmentation answer, like that's probably my segmentation answer. But I think we're working on that and we're evolving that as we move forward. Now back to kind of the demand gen component. We've got a pretty sophisticated SEO strategy that focuses on those regional city pairs. And so I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, where in many cases, commercial travel isn't an option. We support a lot of travel for remote or kind of the secondary markets, where you may have a layover plus a 2 to 3 hour drive. And, if you talk about the meeting scenario again, like if you've got meetings on the same day or even the next day, like that may become unattainable, right? Like you might not be able to make both of those. And so we do a really nice job of capturing folks that are out looking for transportation or travel solutions between those really hard to get to places.
Okay.
And that I would say is a big driver of our business development. And then once we, support them and we take care of their travel needs, I think people I realize they say, this actually could work for a lot of different trips that I may have, particularly if your travel brings you to a number of different places, right? So that I'll give you that answer for now and see if you have any additional questions. But that's a big driver of our demand gen right now.
So SEO keywords then would be city names, and other sort of travel, related, key phrases or
yeah, I would say
travel, charter jets,
city names, airport pairs is a big one. Because people will generally figure out, okay, these are the airports that I need to get to, but I just don't know what service is available between the two of them. So, the remote, or people will say, how do I get to Spokane, Washington, or maybe not the best example, but how do I get to Pierre, South Dakota? And so we do a good job of capturing that and kind of letting them know what their charter options are for those particular.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And then, from a competitive differentiation standpoint, if I needed to charter a flight, what's, how do I find you, or, why would you be a better choice, I guess, than some of the competitors?
Well, I think you're getting me into the value prop here a little bit, and I'll kind of talk about maybe where this strategy doesn't work or breaks down a little bit. I think one, we're still transparent. Two, we give you a lot of the, we give you the range of options, right? We don't try to put you in something that we think might be better for us. We let you make that decision. So we give you that information. And back to why it becomes much more attainable for folks, I think it's because the pricing, well, I mentioned is likely to be more than commercial in some cases, sometimes maybe not. It's more reasonable, especially at the lower end if you're flying an air taxi, because you only need 1 or 2 people to travel an hour or 2, but you need to get back after that meeting. And so I think a lot of people find like, oh, this isn't as expensive as I thought because I'm not flying in, a G5 only to go, an hour or 2. And so, but where I think that starts to break down is like when you look at some of the major markets. So New York to LA, for instance, is kind of a sexier example, right? And there's a lot of competition there, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's a lot of supply in those places, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. And then the value prop, I think, just isn't there as well, because you're going to a very similar airport. There are private airports in New York, like Teterboro or Van Nuys in LA, right? But you might be closer to LaGuardia, and so you're going to the same airport either way. And there's plenty of direct flights from New York to LA. So you're not really saving any time on the flight itself. And then obviously, as I'm sure you can imagine, a cross-country private flight gets to be pretty pricey. And so that isn't quite an area that we would end up playing in, because the value prop isn't there. The cost benefit analysis doesn't work out. And there's just more competition for those trips as well.
Yeah. Is part of the competitive advantage being able to like, I don't know, I'll call it an algorithm, right? You just sort of described an algorithm to me in a way, right? Like, how do you calculate and optimize options, for the buyer, so that you get a more likely sale, right? In other words, because so it sounds fairly complex to me, right? Sort of routing, seating, options, timing, cities. Is that something that you've got an algorithm that actually sort of calculates that, right, and actually drives out potential solutions, or does that happen somewhere else, right, in the booking process?
That's a little bit of our secret sauce, so I'll answer it lightly, if you will. But I mean, we do have what I consider to be kind of a proprietary pricing model, in that we know where all of the FAA registered aircraft available for charter exist. And yes, it's a pricing algorithm that basically understands where those aircraft, what movement those aircraft need to take in order to fulfill a trip that somebody that has gone in and priced out, right? And so that's how we're able to automatically generate pricing for multiple options, based on the route that the customer had put in.
Okay, great. So as you think about like your product roadmap, we'll use kind of SaaS B2B terms now. What are some of the big ticket items, right, that you've got, sort of in your 18-month roadmap? You don't have to be too specific, but just generally speaking, what are some of the innovations, right, that you're trying to drive into the platform?
Yeah, I would say, there's, as I'm sure you can imagine, some nuts and bolts things that we're always kind of tackling and evolving and modernizing our technology and infrastructure. But along the wavelength of pricing, I do think there's an opportunity to look at dynamic pricing, and also leveraging AI related tools for intent, likelihood to buy, while maintaining our margin on particular trips. I also think there's an opportunity to leverage a lot of the data that we have, as well as data that's publicly available. So there's FAA data sets that track, and I would say private data sets as well that are accessible, that track activity and airport activity and frequency of routes, et cetera. And so we can kind of get into this prediction, modeling of who's flying where, when, should we be pricing dynamically off of that? Can we kind of, can we elevate our secret sauce so that we're offering a better price to the customer while still maintaining our margin? I think that's one of the powers in the supply that we have. There's certainly some larger brokers and operators out there, but those brokers may be still operating very similar to how they've done in the past, or the operator doesn't have 7,000 aircraft in their network, right? The operator only has the fleet that they have, and so they may be able to do something similar, but not to the scale that we might be able to over those 18 months or so.
Yeah. We can get into the AI stuff a little bit more, but when you were talking about your, the sort of the complexity of the calculations, expanding, the inputs like you talked about, right, and then using AI, right, to solve some of these more complex problems, seems like a a nice shortcut compared to like complex algorithms, right? That would try to do the same. So yeah, and how are you guys thinking about AI in other ways other than kind of enhancing, the way the platform thinks and calculates?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important. I think it's important to kind of recognize that like AI has been around for a while, in the sense that, machine learning and data science are really AI or AI adjacent. And so we already do a little bit of that, back to what we were, just talking about in terms of, some of the predictions or some of the things that we're thinking about. But when we look at AI for our business, we want to make sure that it will drive ROI on probably repeatable type processes. And in many cases that becomes, I think, the boring stuff, right? AI, I would say, in aviation is much more about, it's not about, flying the plane, it's about flying the business. So areas that we're already leveraging it is in our DevOps process. So we're leveraging AI tools and DevOps. I think we're also, like we were talking about, thinking about some of that dynamic pricing. So those are some of the areas where we've started to both use and are considering. And then, one other area that, and this kind of ties back together with the SEO or the AEO or the answer engine optimization. One of the things that we're investigating, if not actively working on, is leveraging UCP, or the Universal Commerce Protocol. One very unique thing that is an advantage for us is, and I had alluded to this earlier, is that because we make our pricing available instantly and ungated, that's very easy for LLMs and agents to consume. And so we're working on deploying that type of solution, so those agents, the ChatGPTs and the Claudes of the world, can actually book trips without leaving that platform, right? And just candidly, do I think that there would be a ton of engagement out of the gates? No, but over the course of time, do I think that will become much more commonplace? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really valuable because you're capturing that demand when it's happening and fulfilling that booking without the customer ever having to leave the platform that they started in. So that's one thing that we're kind of thinking about.
So yeah, let's talk about UCP a little bit more, right? I mean, it's fairly new. Like, how new is UCP? Like weeks? Months?
Yeah, maybe weeks, maybe.
Okay,
That's what I thought. If you're in the industry, maybe a little bit more. Like, I'm sure there's been rumblings and rumors coming. MCP, or Model Context Protocol, and I know we're getting in the weeds here a little bit. Has been around a little bit longer. But yeah, I think the most notable announcement came from Google probably a month ago.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like, I'll use the age-old analogy, like, skating to where the puck is going in a way.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So when you're thinking about, and it sounds like you're already doing this to some extent, and UCP just puts gas on it, right? Where, how do you do agentic booking, right? Or how do you support agentic booking, right?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it. I think I was already thinking about this. And when UCP had gotten announced, and I was like, oh, well, this might make our lives a little bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it'll also make it more competitive. Probably people will be like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I should have been thinking about this before.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's important for us and really any business leader to kind of think about, and steer your phrase of like skating to where the puck is going, right? But I feel like we're pretty well positioned in that our business models kind of supports that. Other folks may need to pivot a little bit in order to kind of make that a reality. And we've kind of tested our business model and know that it works for us and gives us an opportunity to kind of evolve that and continue to capture, I think, the demand, meet the demand where it is and when people are looking for information.
Yeah. That's interesting. So is it a growing market right now in general?
Yeah, I would say private aviation is very seasonal and cyclical. But the market overall is expected to grow as we move forward. I forget the exact numbers, but I think we can anticipate anywhere from 10 to 15% growth in the overall market by the end of by 2030. So the market is expanding as we move forward. Yeah.
And the number of units in the fleet, right, that you've got access to. I mean, you're obviously accessing more assets that exist, but are new assets coming online? In other words, are there more private jets, right, or aircraft, right, becoming available?
One of the things that I'm excited about is I think some of the advancement in maybe smaller jet aircrafts and in the air taxi space as well. So if you look at a company like Cirrus, Cirrus has been pretty innovative in that space, and they have the SR-22, which we kind of consider like a premium air taxi. Really, I would say ideal for 1 to maybe 3 passengers. A lot of shorter base trips, so think Boston to Nantucket, or probably even a little bit longer than that. But that's a hard destination to get to that a lot of people will fly, or New York out to Montauk or what have you. But I think the economics are also improving at the jet level as well. And so you've seen a lot of these personal jets that have come out recently. So Cirrus has one, there's the Honda Jet, Cessna has the Mustang. And I think we're seeing a lot more of those kind of enter the market because if you were to look at the number of passengers that are actually on a charter flight, like I don't know what the industry average is, but I would probably say it's a lot lower than most people would think. And so you don't need to be flying around an aircraft that can support 14 people for 2 to 3 passengers, right? These jets have much more capability. The economics are better, and they can fly anywhere from Boston to DC or from Denver to LA, right? So a lot of trips happen within those ranges, when you're not talking about cross-country travel. And so I would say that's kind of one of the things that I'm excited about, and I think we're going to end up seeing a lot more of is these personal jet trips where the performance is leveling out with the payload, so to speak, or the number of people that we need to transport. Yeah.
So for the business, any big audacious goals that you have, for the next 3 years?
I would say our big audacious goal is still working to move upstream a little bit out of that air taxi space, and making people feel a little bit more comfortable with booking a larger aircraft in an instant booking format. So I think for us, it's really about kind of moving or making progress along a number of our segments, which is bringing in new customers, getting repeat customers to fly more, and then having repeat customers turn into members, and relying on us for all of their private aviation needs.
Okay. Yeah. And when you think that this will be my last question, we'll kind of wrap here. As you think about sort of valuation, right? And going back to the beginning where you were sort of like an actual, carrier, right? And you think about, how you value a carrier versus how you value, a technology platform, in terms of, just your market cap. How do you think about that as you go forward, right? Improving valuation, is it purely growth for you, like having a growth and profitability model, or is there, other sort of aspects, right, of your business that you are going to try to leverage, right, to improve valuations?
Yeah, I would say that I look at it as we're more valuable as a tech company than we are as a charter broker, if you will. Because if we were a charter broker, then I think it would be very based off of revenue and
assets.
Whereas a technology company, I think that makes us a little bit more attractive to. And I wouldn't say I have a defined map on what the exit or liquidity event or what the next step might be just yet. Obviously, I'm thinking about that and working with our board and what have you. But I think that opens up the opportunities to who could potentially, partner with us, for lack of a better phrase. And the world, the possibilities become a little bit bigger at that point. So when I think about valuation, I think what can we do to improve the technology that obviously will help us grow revenue, not necessarily, just how we are growing revenue, although that's obviously an important part of the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Great. Well, listen, Justin, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. really interesting business. It is a little different, right, than the traditional, executives that we talk to. But how you've gotten into the tech business is kind of a really interesting story. So thanks again for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I enjoyed the conversation and look forward to keeping in touch with you.
All right.